ready to unlock some hidden meanings. We're diving deep into the Jewish tabernacle today. But, and here's the twist, we're not just talking historical facts. We're going deeper, exploring how one author sees it as this incredible blueprint for the Christian gospel.
It really is fascinating, the way the author takes something so ancient like the tabernacle and connects it to our lives today. They argue it's like a model for this spiritual sanctuary we should be building within ourselves.
Exactly. The book we're unpacking is called The Tabernacle, a detailed portrait of Jesus Christ. So imagine this. The Israelites are wandering through the desert with this portable temple, right? Each element so meticulously crafted. But the author, they're saying these physical details, they point to something much deeper, this gospel of the water and the spirit.
And that's key here, that gospel of the water and the spirit. To really get the author's take, we have to understand it. They're saying it's not just about the crucifixion. It's bigger than that. It's about Jesus's baptism too, how he embraced humanity and sin, his kingship, his sacrifice, the whole thing.
It's like the tabernacle is less about the wood and gold and more about revealing the path to salvation.
Exactly.
And to understand that path, we got to start at the beginning. Those massive pillars at the tabernacle gate, 4.5 meters high, talk about making a statement.
It's definitely meant to grab your attention, and the author interprets that grandeur as like this powerful symbol of the incredible sacrifice God made for humanity. They say it's meant to inspire awe and emphasize that to access this sacred space, to reach salvation, you need to really acknowledge your need for atonement.
So it's not like just casually strolling through a doorway.
Yeah.
You're confronting the weight of sin.
Exactly. The author even compares it to that Old Testament idea of the trespass offering. They explain that it wasn't just about replacing what was damaged, it demanded more, showing how serious the transgression was. They're suggesting that Jesus, through his sacrifice, becomes that ultimate trespass offering, atoning not just for specific sins, but for all of humanity's sin.
So it's like Jesus' sacrifice goes above and beyond the typical offering, showing the immensity of God's grace. And this idea of transformation, going from sin to righteousness, it's woven throughout the entire book. Even the materials used, like the bronze and gold, become part of this spiritual metaphor.
Absolutely. The author points out how the pillars and sockets, they're crafted from bronze but overlaid with gold. They see the bronze as symbolic of humanity's fallen state. It's that judgment we deserve for our sin. But then the gold overlay, that represents true faith, the kind that makes us righteous before God. So it's this process of, starting with our flaws, the bronze, and ultimately being covered in the purity of faith, the gold.
So you're literally seeing this visual representation of spiritual refinement. Talk about attention to detail. Now, let's step inside, face the veil. That curtain between the holy place and the most holy of holies. The author really dives into how it's woven with blue, purple, and scarlet thread, like a rainbow, but with this deep theological meaning.
Right. Each color is important. According to the author, purple shows Jesus' kingship, his divine authority. Blue, that represents his humanity, especially his baptism, which they see as the moment he took on all of human sin. And lastly, scarlet signifies his sacrifice through crucifixion.
It's amazing, isn't it? Each thread representing a whole different part of Jesus.
Yeah.
It shows how multifaceted he was and how important that is to our faith.
Yeah, absolutely.
But let's go deeper into the tabernacle.
Okay.
We pass through the veil, and boom, the first thing we hit is the altar of burnt offering. Hard to miss, really, right there in the courtyard.
And the author, they don't think that's by accident. They believe that placement is intentional. It's this powerful reminder that before you can even accept Jesus' sacrifice, you have to acknowledge you've sinned. Like the Israelites making offerings at the altar before even stepping foot in the tabernacle, we have to acknowledge we need atonement before we can get God's grace.
Makes me think of the Lord's Prayer, forgive us our trespasses. It's that core theme of owning your flaws, needing forgiveness front and center.
Oh, absolutely. And the author, they even point out all this extra symbolism built into the altar itself. Remember those huge pillars at the gate, how they represented judgment?
Yeah.
Well, the altar's got horns, and guess what? Same deal, symbolizes judgment. But there's also the 2 poles they used to carry it. They represent both Jesus's baptism and crucifixion.
There it is again, that emphasis on both. Not one or the other, both are key to the Christian message. Both are working together for our salvation. Okay, you've faced your own need for atonement at the altar. Now what? Where does this tabernacle journey take you next?
The laver of bronze, this is where the priests would go, before doing their duties to wash their hands and feet.
Just keeping those priestly robes spotless, right?
That's what it seems like on the surface, but the author sees something way deeper. They're interpreting it as like this need for spiritual cleansing, because even after we accept Jesus, we still mess up, right? We sin, we're human. So the laver, it's that reminder to keep reaffirming our faith, to keep seeking renewal when we're struggling.
Hitting the refresh button on our spiritual lives.
Yeah.
Recognizing we're not perfect, needing that cleansing.
Exactly. And it also ties back to Jesus washing the disciples' feet, remember?
Yeah.
The author argues it wasn't just about humility, it was symbolic. This act of continuous cleansing we're all called to do. It's showing how the Christian life is active. It's a journey of constantly trying to be better.
Speaking of journeys, the author also uses that word pilgrims to talk about believers. What's the significance there?
It's a really interesting comparison, actually. The author's drawing a parallel between, on one hand, you have the Israelites making their way to Canaan, and on the other, you have Christians striving for salvation. Okay. And the connection is this. The Israelites physically packed up and carried the tabernacle with them, right?
Yeah.
Every single step, reaffirming their devotion to God. And Christians, we have to do the same with our faith. Actively nurture it, carry it with us throughout our lives.
So no coasting on autopilot and no just assuming you'll get there without putting in the work. You've got to actively be on this journey, taking care of your spiritual needs as you go. We're covering a lot of ground today, literally and figuratively, exploring this tabernacle and all its symbolism.
Yeah.
And it seems like if we're following the author, every single bit of this structure is just bursting with meaning.
Oh, absolutely. They see the tabernacle as this incredibly intentional design, like a visual representation of God's plan for everyone. And every single part of it, no matter how small, has this deeper truth waiting to be found.
A giant, divinely inspired puzzle.
Exactly.
Each piece revealing a bigger picture of our faith.
So where does that leave our listener, the one who's eager to learn?
Yeah.
What can they take away from all this deep dive into the tabernacle?
I mean, honestly.
Yeah.
This is just the beginning, It's incredible to think we've only just scratched the surface. We've explored the gate, those materials, the veil, the altar, the laver. But what other symbolic treasures are waiting to be unearthed within the tabernacle?
And that's where it gets even more interesting, because if we're going with the author's idea that every little detail has some deeper meaning, well, then what about the Ark of the Covenant, the table of showbread, heck, even the lampstand? Each one's a whole new path to explore.
We haven't even touched the Holy of Holies, the inner sanctum of the tabernacle where the ark was kept.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of it. The author gives us the framework, but it's up to us as readers, as people of faith, to keep digging, keep asking questions, keep finding those connections between the physical tabernacle and the spiritual truth it represents.
It's like we've been handed this map, right, to this huge, intricate landscape. But we get to choose our own path. Which landmarks we check out, what we personally take away from the journey.
What speaks to you? What elements of the tabernacle are you most interested in exploring further through this lens of the gospel of the water and the spirit?
I love that. Okay, we've covered a ton today, from what bronze and gold represent to that powerful act of spiritual cleansing. So for our listener, what's the takeaway? What can they glean from this deep dive into the tabernacle and all its hidden depths?
I hope it reminds them that even something ancient like the tabernacle, it can still hold incredibly relevant insights for us, even today. That it's worth looking beyond the surface of things, seeking deeper meanings and remembering that faith, it's a journey, one we're always exploring and discovering on.
It's like taking something familiar that you might think, oh, I get that. And then boom, there's a whole new layer of meaning.
Yeah.
And that spiritual growth can come from engaging with these ancient stories, these symbols, in fresh, meaningful ways.
Exactly. And you never know, maybe this will spark something new in our listeners. Maybe they'll start their own deep dives into the symbolism of the tabernacle. There's always more to learn, more to uncover, This journey of faith, it never really ends.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So there you have it. A fascinating trip to the tabernacle, uncovering its hidden depths, exploring the profound symbolism woven into its very fabric. We looked at how one author interprets this ancient structure as a blueprint for the Christian gospel, reminding us that true faith, it's an ongoing process of transformation and spiritual renewal. Until next time, keep exploring, keep those questions coming, and keep seeking those deeper meanings.